All right, everybody. This is kind of a this is a we're going to talk a little free agency episode of Under the Dome, but we really need to have a bit of a somber episode because Tom Benson passed away last Thursday. Um, this is the first time because the Saints have only had two owners throughout the entire franchise's history. This is the first time the Saints and Saints fans have ever had to deal with a transition from an owner to an heir. And how this goes from this point forward is entirely new ground because, as we'll get into tonight, we're going to talk about the contributions that Tom Benson left this organization, especially when you compare him to his predecessor, John Meekum, and what Meekum did to the organization versus the professionalism that Tom Benson brought along. I'm your host, Alan Ulrich. I'm here with the somewhat under the weather, but going to stick it out because he cares so much about you, the fans, Sean Williams. Hi, Sean. And our unofficial third partner, Mr. Bob Rose, up in beautiful Pennsylvania. And you're about to get another nor'easter, aren't you?
Yeah, we are. I'm looking out the window right now, and I read a tweet earlier, somebody complaining about March came in like a lamb and is going out like a jackass. But yeah, we got some snow coming down right now. I can't wait for springtime and summertime.
My dad is actually closer to you than he is to me. He's 60 miles from Harrisonburg on a job. He said, if I don't ever see another snowflake in my life, I don't care.
I got to get down south near you guys where I'll see snow maybe a couple times over a few year period of time.
Sure.
We think we got it bad. We got a feel for our unofficial fourth member, the director of media relations for Under the Dome, John Pinto. It's like a weekly post on Facebook that says, "Oh dear God, not again!" and it's a picture of the Atlantic Northeast, and it's blue from like Maryland to Canada. It's blue, and he said, "Oh God, I've got to move." We want to thank you guys for joining us tonight, as always. I'm hanging with you guys, not exactly top form, so I called in my backup quarterback. We'll just call. No, I'm not going to call him Luke McCown. We're not going to go there. We're going to go for a completely clean slate. Anyway,
he's your Bobby Scott to you, Archie Manning.
There you go. I can live with that.
There you go.
But we want to thank you guys for joining us tonight on Under the Dome. Invite you guys to subscribe to our iTunes and our YouTube channel at Under the Dome Podcast. We want to thank Fan First Productions for sponsoring. Man, we have been doing this. This is the third year. No. Actually, officially, July 20th will make the end of our second year. All this time, and I have to write down every week to thank our sponsors. Anyway, that'll give you an interesting insight to where the head is at tonight. But nonetheless, there's a job to do, and we live for Tuesday nights and hanging with you guys. As Alan alluded to, we're, as Saints fans right now, we're in uncharted territory. We're kind of like we're not really like the Romans in that we have an assassinated leader, but the leader is gone, and nonetheless, there's going to be a succession of power now. My initial reaction was the name of the New Orleans Mercedes-Benz Superdome needed to be changed to the Tom Benson Mercedes-Benz Superdome. A long shot at best, probably. I've seen it really did my heart good, actually, that I've seen several Facebook petitions and posts about the Lee Circle that was basically disassembled in the wake of all of the protests and everything about Civil War monuments, that they wanted to have that renamed to Tom Benson Circle rather than Lee Circle. I think, regardless of whether they actually go to the nth degree and rename the Superdome, which would be cool because that would make Tom Benson the only man in NFL history to have 2 NFL stadiums named after him.
True.
There's no way to possibly make it for me to let you guys know exactly the impact that this man had on the state of Louisiana, and not just the state of Louisiana, but also the state of this franchise. In '85, when Benson took over ownership of this, it was floundering, and they were the lovable losers of the NFL. Now, it wasn't nearly a Cinderella overnight success, but over the years, under Tom Benson, the things that the New Orleans Saints can actually claim to fame, if you want to call it that, the Dome Patrol, Bobby Hebert, and of course bringing in Peyton and then Breeze and the Super Bowl. All of that happened under Tom Benson's watch. As I understand it, after over a year's trip through the Louisiana court system, the litigation has yielded that Gail Benson will take over ownership of the team. And from all indications, this is something that she's been planning for some time now, the family and she. I don't anticipate any drastic changes to come about from that. Maybe Alan, you have more knowledge into that than I do.
Well, basically, Rita Benson was originally groomed to be the replacement for Tom Benson. That had been in the works for a long time, and then for whatever reason, it was a falling out. Many rumors. I'm not going to get into that about things that Rita had done or said or whatever, but it basically when Tom married, this is Tom's third wife, Gail. His first 2 wives, he died. He buried both of them. Rita's mother's mother is Tom Benson's first wife, Shirley, and then he had a second wife, Grace, who that's the one you probably have seen on old clips from the Dome Patrol era on the sideline with him. The
Benson's Boogie.
Yeah, that was Grace, and quite frankly, Tom had trying to put a plan together for a long time for a secession, because he was 57 when he bought the team back in 1985. So you just start adding up the years. When he got to be 77, 80 years old, he's starting to need now, okay, I've got a plan for the future. And I think it was Ralph Marlboro who said it best. Successful people plan. Billionaires plan with lawyers. And, that's exactly what he had going on. And he had said at the time that Rita was the only one who really showed any kind of interest in the team. When he married Gail in 2004, that's when you started seeing some of the tension really rise up within the first few years. They appeared a lot on the field together, but then, the tension started around after the Super Bowl season. And it wasn't long after that, it was a 2014 season, 2015 season, where the split happened. I don't remember anymore. I think it was 2015 where the split happened between where she had. I do know that Rita had a leave of absence for a while earlier, like around 2011, 2012. She wasn't seen. She came back to the team, and then this was the final straw. Apparently, the split happened. But yeah, it's the organization is all Gail. It's now she has Mickey Loomis and Dennis Lauscher as her top advisors, and Dennis has been with the team well before Katrina's. Dennis has been there almost since I think the Hazlitt years, the first and the Randy Mueller years. So she's got people around her. Unlike when Benson bought the team in 1985, she's got people around her that know the NFL, know the business. Benson didn't know anything about the business. Bobby Hebert was telling some funny stories about the first practice that Tom Benson went to, and this was 1985. He starts asking questions. Why, how Tom Benson talks, why you got some guys in black jerseys and some guys in white jerseys? We're all supposed to be one team. Why do they got different jerseys on? And, they're like, oh, Tom, that's the defense and this is the offense. And that's, yeah. And he's like, oh, no, it's all for one. It's like, no. Offense. So, it's funny to think about these things, and just him not knowing how the NFL works and things like that. Gail doesn't have to go through that. Gail's been around. He's been grooming her now since he made that decision. She's been at the meetings, and of course, she's got good advisors to help her move along. But they've got a plan in place. This was not a sudden death. No death is ever expected, but this was a planned for death. If that's probably the least offensive way of saying it. Bob, why don't you chime in on some of the things that you know about Tom, and then I'll tell some stories about John Meekum and compare him to Tom Benson.
Well, and unlike the two of you guys, most of my experiences have been from bird's eye view up here in Pennsylvania. But I've followed the Saints all of my life, and I've been pretty much a big fan. And like you guys pointed out, they were pretty close to the laughing stock of the league most of my life up to 1985. And when Benson bought the team, he got a plan together quickly. You talked, Alan, about surrounding himself with football people. It took him a couple years to do that. The USFL folding and starting to disband was the best thing that could have happened to the New Orleans franchise. And Benson right there, then and there, showed loyalty in bringing in Jim Mora and a couple of the USFL cast-offs that might not have had a job in the NFL otherwise. And it's the kind of loyalty that Benson has shown to people all of his Saints tenure. He literally saved the franchise by buying them and building them back up, making them into a perennial playoff contender. And all three of us are old enough, sadly, to remember how scared the dynasty of the San Francisco 49ers was of those Dome Patrol and Bobby Hebert and Jim Mora-led teams. They might not have made a Super Bowl, obviously, and they never won a playoff game, but they were feared and respected throughout the NFC. And that was the first time that had obviously ever happened to the New Orleans franchise. And then, as any team will do, they fell on some rocky times through the mid and late 90s, and that's putting it mildly. And then again, Benson showed the capability to let good people around him handle the football side of things. And that's what separated him from a lot of the owners, even that we see today. He wasn't a particularly meddlesome guy. He brought in people that he trusted and that were very competent, and he let them run the football side of the operations. And we saw another bounce back under the Hazlitt regime. And then we all know, what has happened to this team and this franchise since he brought in Drew Brees and Sean Payton. And he showed him. Payton talked about this at length, this past weekend. Sean talked about how much loyalty that Mr. Benson showed to him during the whole Bounty Gate witch hunt thing by the commissioner's office and in the league in general. And we know the way the NFL works, even back in 2012 and certainly today. I can't see any other owner that would have stuck with his coach through that kind of controversy and fallout, because we remember, I take that back. A lot of us forget how much this cost the Saints franchise. Multiple draft choices over a span of a couple of years, and darn near half of the main offensive coaching staff was suspended for at least a portion, and in Sean Payton's case, that whole year. And Benson stuck by them all. There's not many other owners that will do that. The fact, and again, I'll harken back to my youth when the Saints got really, really good. 1987 was their first winning season and first playoff season. Just how excited that Mr. Benson was on the sideline and with the team, and just excited to be a part of the process. I know the Benson Boogie became a national thing, but it started out, he didn't start out doing that because he was trying to get his face on SportsCenter or anything like that. That was just his way of getting excited. And for a kid, I was 14 years old at the time. It was really easy to love these New Orleans Saints right up through the ownership.
Yeah, my understanding was that Roger Goodell wanted Tom Benson to fire Sean Payton and Mickey Loomis for Bounty Gate, and he refused to do both. And that's why they were suspended. But yeah,
and another thing that people don't realize, Bounty Gate came on the heels. Was it a year or maybe 2 years after the Super Bowl that all of this came about?
2 years.
I thought it was.
Yeah, it was 2012.
So you're basically looking at the exact same roster that brought you a Lombardi trophy, and you're looking to get back there, and that was the impetus of basically disassembling that Super Bowl roster.
Yeah. And here's the thing, and Bob mentioned it earlier. When John Mecum owned the team, Mecum was a lot like, he was 26 years old when he was awarded the team back in 1966. Imagine yourself at 26 being in charge of an NFL franchise. The players are older than you are. Okay. So he tried to bring in people. He thought he would take advice from everybody, and he thought it would be fun to be an NFL owner. And he thought he was just going to be able to just build a dynasty just by grabbing some named players. It was rumored he was after Vince Lombardi. He brought in Jim Taylor and Paul Hornung, and he traded for Gary Quazzo because he thought those are the players that were going to make it Packer-like, because the Packers were the dominant team of the era. And he really had no idea what he was doing as far as putting together a team. He just thought, if I got a bunch of big-name players near the end of their career, I can get winning early, and the success will just start from there. It would be that easy. And he really had no clue. So in 1970, once he fired Tom Fears, the first head coach, he brings in J.D. Roberts from the Richmond Roadrunners, a semi-pro team, and he brings in an astronaut, Dick Gordon, I believe. He brought in as a general manager. So you've got a semi-pro head coach for your football team, and you have an astronaut as a GM. What kind of success do you think you're going to have? Compare that to Benson in 1986, when once he got it, his feet wet, and Bum Phillips showed him the ropes, and Bum Phillips later resigned and retired from coaching. His first decision is to hire Jim Finks, who built the Minnesota Vikings and built a Chicago Bears team in 1977. Did go to the playoffs. He built the Chicago Cubs in 1984. That was the first team, I think, to win the NL East since the old Ernie Banks days. back in around World War II. So you had a proven winner as general manager, and then he hires the winningest coach in the USFL history, not a semi-pro coach. So you can see automatically why you got more success out of Benson's plan versus the kind of things that John Mecum was doing. And with Benson, it's no coincidence your best drafts all came during his watch. 86, 2000, 2006, and now 2017. 1981 is the only other draft, and you had to go 1-15 to get a draft as good as any of those four that I just named. You just had a much more professional, much more football-oriented organization, whereas Mecum was just kind of bouncing around trying to figure out how to put a football team together and had no clue on even where to start.
Well, Mecum was in a position where it was like any idea is a good idea, and everybody had ideas. So you're going 90 different directions at one time with no direction.
And Mecum had never built anything. Mecum was the son of an oil man. That's why the Saints colors are black and gold, because he was black gold oil. Tom Benson came from nothing, built an automobile dealership empire, took that money from his dealerships, invested in banks. That made him more money. He even had a bank company. He owned banks. And then he got into media, got into other things where he was successful at building stuff. He had been building things his whole life. John Mecum had never built anything, so he didn't know where to even begin on how to build something from the ground up. So, again, the differences between the two owners. It's no coincidence you had a lot of success on Tom Benson, because he knew how things are supposed to work. The only bad hire, honestly, he had two bad decisions. I take that back. He had two bad decisions. His first bad decision was after Jim Finks passed away in 1993, creating a triumvirate of Jim Moore, Jim Miller, and Bill Kuharich to act as general manager. Okay? And what you laughing about?
I've seen your eyebrows become one in the center talking about Kuharich.
Yeah. Well, Kuharich was the one that survived in 1997 when he fired Jim Miller, and Jim Moore resigned. He promoted Kuharich to be the general manager of the Saints, and then he hired Mike Ditka. So those two were really bad decisions because... But to Benson's credit, when he looked at the disaster he created, he did the same thing he did in 1986. Once Bum was retired, or Bum resigned and retired from coaching, he cleaned house, got rid of everybody, and including the media director. He even had to hire back like Greg Suit, the media director, because, you turned out that was actually the best media guy you had out there, so we can bring him back. But he got rid of everybody and brought in Finks and Moore and their people. He did the same thing in 2000, got rid of everybody, and then brings in Randy Mueller, and Randy Mueller hires Jim Haslett with the idea we're going to start again with all new football people. So, you could see Benson understood that. The Saints under Mecum, they would just compound mistakes. You fire Tom Fears. You hire as an interim head coach J.D. Roberts. J.D. Roberts finishes your coach. Rather than go on a new coaching search and bring in guys like, I believe George Allen was out there, you bring in proven winners. I know, Vince Lombardi died in 1970, but rather than bring in proven winners, he goes and re-ups and hires J.D. Roberts. He did the same thing with John North. He hires Hank Stram. He fires. He brings in Dick Nolan out of Hank Stram's coaching staff to be head coach. I mean, so it's just
the early history of the Saints is like, well, I'm mad because you did something stupid, but luckily you can't get any more stupid than that. And then that person looks at them and says, hold my beer and watch this.
Yep. Quit telling people, how can you be so stupid? Because they take it as a challenge.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this. To get your perspective on this, Alan, the only thing, there were really, over the years, there were two things that I ever heard that kind of negatively impacted the legacy of Tom Benson in terms of like the Saints. And obviously one of them was leading up to Katrina, the rumors of the moving of the team to San Antonio, which obviously didn't happen. But the other was...
But it came very close.
Yes. It would have happened had Katrina not happened. I'm fully convinced of that.
No, it would have happened if the fans didn't step up in 2006 and sell out the Dome. Because we were on probation. Not double secret probation. We were on probation, though, with the league. Benson had started this stuff back in 2003 and 2004 with then Governor Blanco. He had arranged a deal with Mike Foster because of free agency. He arranged a deal with Mike Foster, who was then governor of the state, that basically he was getting direct transfer payments from the state to him, okay, to keep the Saints competitive, all right, financially competitive. Because, and you can go back to Jerry Jones and people like Dan Snyder, Jones and Snyder were making these side deals. They were the first ones to make these side deals outside of the typical revenue sharing that the NFL has that like Major League Baseball does not have. Under Pete Rozelle, all the money that every franchise made all went into a general pool and was shared equally among all the teams. Jerry Jones, Dan Snyder, some of the new owners that were coming in didn't like that relationship because they didn't feel that a team like the Dallas Cowboys, who were the major draw of the NFL, should have to share their money with a team like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the Seattle Seahawks, the Saints, the Bills, the Packers, teams that were in very small markets with very little financial support outside of their fan bases. Okay, so that's when you start seeing naming rights to stadiums sold. You started seeing side deals with the Pepsi, the official beverage of the Dallas Cowboys. You start seeing the practice jerseys, some local company sponsoring the practice jerseys. These were all side deals that teams were making with companies, and then have to share that money. So that's why Tom Benson was looking for more money. And what's the best way to make more money for your franchise was to get a new stadium. Well, Kathleen Blanco's like, all right, hold on, time out. Number one, we're not doing this direct transfer of payments from the state anymore, which pissed Benson off. And then secondly, when Benson started using these were actual terms he used in 2004, because I remember the press conference, described the Superdome as dingy, dirty, old, decrepit, and wanted this new, and I've got pictures of it I can post on Under the Dome. I still have the pictures that he put up of what kind of stadium he wanted. This open air, retractable roof stadium. He had all these designs out, and this is what he wanted the state to pay for. And if I remember right, where he wanted to put this stadium was, it's where Storyville used to be, and a set of projects are there now. But they've since, I think it was the Iberville projects, they've since, kind of renovated. They're now Section 8 housing. But that's where he wanted to put this thing, right off of the interstate. The back end was supposed to open up into the French Quarter, North Rampart Street. But yeah, and the city was like, no, you're not doing this. The state says, we're not paying for this new stadium. We're not even going to do these transfer payments. We're going to have to renegotiate this deal where the state's giving you less money. Benson got pissed. Yeah, and then here comes Katrina. And Benson had a deal in place with the San Antonio mayor to move the team to San Antonio for the 2006 season, but the league had shot that down. He was mad that he had to play 3 games in Baton Rouge. He wanted to play all the home games for the rest of the season in San Antonio because he wanted to build that San Antonio base. So yeah,
he ought to build a stadium in San Antonio, hadn't he?
They were going to use the Alamo Dome until they did build a stadium, but that it never got that far where they would talk about a new stadium because the league owners were going to have to approve something like that. And Paul Tagliabue basically did a Solomon-like decision and said, you know what, we can't abandon this city when they're on their knees like this after a natural disaster. But, and they did have studies that came out. In Tom Benson's defense, they did have studies that came out in 2003 and 2004 questioning whether or not New Orleans could ever really support a NFL franchise because the season ticket base was hovering around 40,000. I think it was 38,000 in 2005 prior to Katrina. They had to rely on banks and insurance companies and some lawyers to buy out the last block of tickets. So you had sellouts. So the blackout was lifted in 2004 and 2003. There were a lot of questions about whether or not the city could afford to maintain the Saints. And Katrina, the fallout after Katrina in 2006 and the success that we have had has now made all that stuff seem like that never happened. Because, the people on the waiting list now, there's more people on the waiting list for season tickets than there was a season ticket base in 2005. And really, this man and Sean Payton were really the ones responsible for that happening. Because I promise you.
More so this man than Sean Payton.
Yeah.
Sean Payton could not have accomplished what he accomplished. And this is my opinion. I've voiced this more than right now. I've said this several times. Sean Payton could not have accomplished what he did with any other quarterback besides Drew Brees. And I think to a certain extent, maybe that the reverse would also be true. Drew Brees would never have done what he did with just about any other coach besides Sean Payton as well.
Yeah, I think that's pretty accurate. It's just amazing if you think about where this franchise was prior to Peyton and Brees, and how much success they have gotten. And that's one of the reasons why I'm in no hurry to see Peyton or Brees go, because really, I mean, once, just like with Gale taking over as owner, we're stepping into the unknown again. A guy like this only comes, once a generation, and it's a scary thought what this franchise will be like with a different quarterback if they don't have the level of success that they had. Will the fans continue to support this team, or are we going to end up, because this lease ends in 2025. This current situation with the Saints in the state. In 2025, are we looking at another repeat of the 2003-2004 seasons? I don't know. I hope not. I don't think we will, but it's a real possibility. So, Bob, I kind of talked up everything. I mean, what do you have to? Do you have anything to add to something like that? I mean, what do you see as on the outside?
Well, and you guys were talking about the unprecedented success that the team has had since Peyton and Breeze come on board. And any Saints fan, there's not a Saints fan in existence who disagree with that. And the numbers speak for themselves. And that's one. And I know we got to move on to free agency and et cetera. But that's one final testimonial to Tom Benson. The fact that he brought in guys like this, and they became a family together. And you know, he showed Peyton and Breeze and the people around him the loyalty, and gave them the necessary tools, because it was more than just money. I mean, it was backing and confidence of your ownership, and that cannot be downplayed. No coach. I mean, any job that any one of us have ever worked in. How much more effectively can you do your job without looking over your shoulder all the time? Wondering, second and third guessing yourself if the man or the woman at the top is going to have your head on the chopping block before your decision making process even gets completely fulfilled. And Peyton knew that he always had the backing of Benson. And of course, not all the decisions were 100% effective, but that's just the law of averages. That's why Sean Payton and the coaching staff and the general manager, that's why they've been able to do this mini rebuild that we've seen from this team after 3 straight 7 and 9 seasons. They've completely rebuilt it again from the ground up. Look at how many players are on this team that are in their second or third or coming into their fourth years, or are 25 years old or younger. Outside of Breeze, this is one of the youngest rosters in the NFL. And again, we'll give one final testimony to Tom Benson, because he's the one that sat at the top and allowed all this to happen. And I think at the very minimum, there should be a statue of him outside of the Superdome.
Well, there is one of him. Holding up the trophy. In fact, there's 2 statues outside. Well, 3 technically, but there's 2 statues dedicated to people who contributed to the dome. Tom Benson is one of them. Governor McKithen is the other. And he's on the far side of the dome, because if it wasn't for Governor McKithen, who okayed the idea of building a stadium, the Superdome, thanks to Dave Dixon pushing that kind of thing. His statue's out there too. That's why he and Dave Dixon consider the fathers of the Superdome. And of course, there's the Gleason block punt statue out there as well. But yeah, Tom Benson did tremendous things for this city and for this team by keeping the Saints here, because there was a real, just backing up a little bit, in '85, when John Meekum wanted to sell this team in '84, there was a very real possibility. And if you watch the history of the Baltimore Colts, when the Colts left in 1983, Jacksonville had been trying to get a professional football team for a long time, and one of the teams they were after was the Baltimore Colts back in 1981, 82, I believe, and they didn't get them. The Colts ended up going to Indianapolis. But Jacksonville was also pushing hard for the Saints in '84. And there was a group out of Chicago called the Pricksters who almost bought the team when then Governor Edwin Edwards, that was their real name, sorry. They really were. They're the Pricksters. But anyway,
yes, they were.
Yes, they were.
Sorry, but, I just went back to the 5th and 6th grade.
There we go. But Governor Edwin Edwards was the one who really got Benson involved in it, because Benson had never been to a Saints game, had never been to a football game. He knew nothing about professional football, and he was able to get Benson and a group of minority owners together to put a plan together to buy this team from Meekum. I think it was $70 million. I think that's what the price was in 1985. So, yes, Tom Benson, and now it's worth over $1 billion. But yes, Tom Benson almost moved the team after Katrina, but he also kept the team from leaving. It would have been a disaster, even as bad as they were in '84 and '85. it would have been disaster for this city to lose a team like the Saints. Because you would have never gotten a professional football team here again. Never.
Well, yeah, just look at the NBA and the Jazz.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that team moved because the owner was a Mormon, and one of the team in Utah. But yeah, because the Jazz had set records for attendance. I went to some Jazz games as a kid in the Superdome.
Pistol Pete.
Yep, Hot Rod Hundley would call the game, and yeah, Pistol Pete. And Gail Goodrich, and I could rattle off quite a few old names. But, yeah, the Jazz were very well liked in New Orleans, and he just moved the team because he wanted to go to Utah, you know.
Yeah. That happened when I was relocated into Western Oklahoma, so I missed out on that.
It was fun. There were fun games.
Let's transition with the few minutes that we have left. I have a list here of basically all of our re-signings and kind of an off-season tracker. The guys that we've re-signed, Thomas Morstead, we signed to a 5-year extension. Mm-hmm. Alex Okafor, we re-signed to a 2-year, $10 million deal. Willie Snead we tendered, which basically means we did nothing. Drew Brees we re-signed to 2 years, $50 million. George Johnson, is he a water boy?
He's a guy who blocked a punt in the Vikings game, and he also got 2.5 sacks playing in 3 games.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, yeah,
and they paid him $915,000 contract. Yep. Also, John Theus, offensive tackle, claimed off of waivers, and Zach Wood, the long snapper that we got in basically in a pinch after John Dornbroth's medical malady came to light. But the new players that we're bringing in, and this is where I want to bring in Bob, because the last one on the list here, before I even got the notification, Bob's sending me text messages saying, "We got my man." We signed safety Kurt Coleman to a 3-year deal. We're bringing back Patrick Robinson, and also I want to get Alan's take on Patrick Robinson returning. We signed Tom Savage, the backup to Watson in Houston a year ago.
Mm-hmm.
He's now the backup quarterback, and we're bringing back offensive lineman Jermon Bushrod. Last but certainly not least, and I throw this to Bob, linebacker Demario Davis from the New York Jets. Break it down for us, Mr. Rose.
In reading through social media, there's been some mixed opinions on Demario Davis, but he's bringing so much speed and athleticism and an underrated ratio of strength to this Saints linebacking core. It is an immediate upgrade, and it allows the unit to be deeper. And I've been on this show before. I think every time I come on here and the subject of defense comes up, I talk about needing to upgrade the linebacking core. And they did a little bit bringing in Klein. Manti Te'o had a good season, and we never really got to see what Alex Anzalone can do. But Demario Davis was on my short list of linebackers that I wanted them to bring in. He could play either inside or outside. He's in the physical prime of his career. He's 29 years old. He's been in the league six years. Been a leading tackler for the Jets, either the leading or second leading tackler for the Jets in one season with the Browns. Every year he's been into the league. He's a devastating hitter. He's a good fundamental tackler. Man-to-man coverage is not his strength, but I mean he's a student of the game, so he's going to get better. And Dennis Allen, the defensive coordinator, and Mike Nolan, the linebacker coach, they're gonna use Davis to his strengths. He's a good zone dropper. He recognizes and diagnoses plays well, and he has explosive sideline to sideline ability. So he's not going to let too many backs coming out of the backfield on swing passes. He's not going to let too many backs get by him once he drops back and recognizes what's going on. I really love this signing, and he seems, he grew up about 3 hours from New Orleans too. Has a good NFL lineage. One of his cousins was Steve McNair, the former NFL quarterback. And like I said, he's a student of the game, and he seems really excited to be here. I can't wait to see him on the field.
Bob, let me ask you this before we go to Alan. You use the term an instant upgrade. Now, I've heard this term used when people were discussing bringing in Tyrann Mathieu over Kenny Vaccaro and other different, of course, obviously, Ndamukong Suh. But when you term him as an instant upgrade, which linebacker are you referring to? If you don't mind me putting you on the spot there.
No, I don't mind at all. I think first and foremost, Davis is a sure 3-down linebacker. He plays the run just as well as he plays the pass. So when the defense goes into their sub packages where they might only have 2 or maybe even 1 linebacker on the field, he's going to be that guy. So they don't have to necessarily. It's more of a sub package thing than anything else, I think. Because AJ Klein is going to be a starter, and then Davis and Klein are going to be sure starters, I think. And then the third starter, if you're going to start the game in a basic 4-3, that third starter is going to be up for grabs, most likely on the weak side between I think Robertson and Anzalone. I like both guys a lot. Both guys are good athletically. But Davis gives you stability, and that's something that this linebacking core is missing. A guy that can be a playmaker, not only in the running game but the passing game, regardless of situation, and that's where he's an instant upgrade.
Okay,
I completely agree with that. That's exactly how I see it too. Your top 4 linebackers are Davis, Anzalone, Klein, and Robertson. With you've got Teo and maybe another linebacker you bring in the draft for depth, special teams kind of guy. Linebacker that you may want to groom one day to be the strong side backer or weak side backer and compete with Anzalone. But yeah, I think I totally agree with that projection right now.
To be totally honest with you, I don't think, and you guys may think I'm beating a dead horse, but I don't think that the New Orleans Saints have nearly even remotely heard the last of Andrew Big Hill. I think he's going to figure into this mix a lot better this coming season than this past season.
He's going.
I'm sorry, Sean. You cut out on me. Who did you say?
Adam
Big Hill.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we talked about the 4 starters. Teo will be in the mix for depth, and Nate. Don't forget about Nate Stupar either. He's coming back from injury.
Mm-hmm.
As far as a versatile, I do think Big Hill will be a factor in the linebacking unit. Certainly as far as depth goes. No, I think he's absolutely still in the mix.
Okay, Alan, let me ask you this. And I've heard different reviews on this signing ever since it happened, but I guess the simplest way to put it to you, the Patrick Robinson that we're bringing back versus the Patrick Robinson that we cut a few years ago. Are we in a better position now than we were?
I think we're in a better position now. I think you've got 2 guys. You're not asking him to be a starter on the outside. You're asking him to be the nickel corner. So you're really having him compete with P.J. Williams. And based on his performance in Philadelphia, Robertson is an upgrade of a Williams. That doesn't mean you cut. This is how people look at stuff. You don't cut Williams, though, because of that. You let Williams compete with Robertson and continue to push Robertson. But you're not asking Robertson to cover the best receiver anymore. And you're not asking him to play man-on-man with very little safety help. That's what you have a guy like Crawley, and definitely what you have with Lattimore for. Those are the guys who are going to go up against the Julio Joneses and the Antonio Browns and the best receiver on the team. They're going to match up with them. What you're going to have Robertson cover are players like the Taylor Gabriels, I'm just trying to think of a good solid nickel receiver or slot receiver. That's who Robertson's going to handle. And he's in a much better position now. I think he's a much better cornerback now than the cornerback we had 2 or 3 years ago. I mean, because you got to remember, he also went to San Diego too. So he has kind of figured out where he belongs in the league. I
saw a press release from him earlier this week where he said, I don't sit and wonder what if nearly so much anymore as just playing the game.
Yeah.
And I responded to that and I said, oh, so you mean you have become a more mature player?
Well, he's never been that first round draft pick that the impact player you thought you were getting. But
he's not going to be a Marshawn Lattimore.
No, he's not. He's not going to be a Marcus Peters. He's not going to be a Xavier Rhodes. He's not going to be any of those kind of guys. But he is going to be a guy who, now that he's matured and now that he's learned more about the game, he's going to be a guy who doesn't get beat making dumb mistakes. He's going to be at best with the Saints. He can be a Randall Gay kind of guy, that guy who can come in and occasionally, if he has to move to a starting spot, it's not a disaster. But the best thing you've got for him is for him to play against the number 3 receiver, not the number 1 or number 2 guy. And I think you set him up for success that way. That's how Philadelphia played him. I think that's where he fits best.
Okay.
Yeah. Go ahead, Sean.
No, go ahead, Bob.
Okay, I'm sorry. I will agree with that assessment. I admit I had a minor overreaction, and I text Sean when P-Rob P-Rob was signed, and we'll keep that conversation private. But yeah, after I've had a couple days to reflect, this, like you guys said, this isn't the Patrick Robinson from 2012. He's not going to be asked to do this kind of things that was expected from him as a number 1 draft choice. Looking at, we have one of the best cornerbacks in the league already in Marshawn Lattimore. We have a very underrated number 2 in Kentucky. B.J. Williams, a very inconsistent season last year. He did have some nice moments, and you put Robinson into that mix as perhaps a probable number 3 cornerback right now, and that's 4 good solid cornerbacks to go up against pretty much any receiving corps. So as long as you don't need Patrick Robinson to play on the outside number 1 or number 2 guys for a long stretch games during the season, I think you're all right.
Yeah, you're not exposing him to the slant and goes and the back shoulder passes and things like that. You can let him play his kind of game, which is where he really belongs. And I know a lot of people were upset that Delvin Breaux got basically told to shove off, but we talked about this last week. Delvin Breaux, 2014 was a long time ago. As far as was it 2015? Yeah. 2015 was his season, but 2015 was a long time ago in football years. You have not played basically for almost 2 full years. His inability to come back mid-season last year from IR, when they put him on short-term IR, really kind of sealed his fate with the Saints because they just can't rely on him. You cannot. You can't have the old saying, you can't make the club from the tub. That's what happened with Delvin Breaux. They can't keep holding his spot because he showed potential in 2015. It just doesn't work that way. They've got to move forward. And so, what do? You want to bring somebody in to challenge P.J. Williams, and the only way you can really do that is bring in a veteran corner who Dennis Allen has coached, Dennis Allen is familiar with. So you bring in a guy like Patrick Robertson to challenge Williams and try and upgrade your nickelback. You may have to start some games because, every year the injury bug just ravages that secondary. You need to have somebody with some kind of experience, and that's why the deal makes sense. It wouldn't have been my choice, but it is what it is. To
be honest with you, I don't think that the New Orleans Saints have seen the last of either Delvin Breaux or Kenny Vaccaro, because no one is exactly beating down their doors to employ them at the moment. And, they may want to get those big paychecks and may want to be that start, but when it comes right down to it, getting paid a little is better than not getting paid at all.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask you guys this in closing.
Mm-hmm.
Is Ndamukong Suh a afterthought in the city of New Orleans at this point?
Not according to the fans, he's not. They ask about him all the time on Twitter. Who knows? Go ahead, Bob.
Let him take his tour. If I'm Mickey Loomis and Sean Payton, I say I gave my pitch, you didn't take it. I'm moving on to my contingency plans. Whether it's high drafting, if you want to prioritize defensive tackle high in the draft, and I think that they might. Whether that's the plan or there's still a few nice names available in defensive tackle and free agency right now. Jonathan Hankins, Clinton McDonald are a couple guys that come to mind. If I'm Peyton and I'm Mickey Loomis, I move on. But Suh is continuing to take his tour, continuing to eat at the fine restaurants of Seattle and Oakland and Los Angeles and, of course, New Orleans. I would be surprised to see him in the New Orleans Saints uniform.
I think he's milking this for all it's worth right now. He is on this tour. He just wants to see what people are going to offer him as far as a contract. That's all this is. This isn't about finding a winner, finding a good fit. It's really about the paycheck. And I don't know. He may decide later on that, the Saints did offer me the best deal, and I'll go to him. But I'm not counting on this. I think if it happens, wonderful. But the very fact that he's still on this tour, he hasn't made a decision on any club, tells me that he is trolling for money, and it's going to come down to whatever team offers him the most money. And it could be just a one-year deal, like the Honey Badger, where he got, $7 million for a year over there. Houston, and that could be the case. And you were talking about Vaccaro earlier, Vaccaro and Breaux. The safety market in general pretty much is dried up. And I think because teams are more interested in not paying a defensive back like a safety a lot of money, they think that it's a lot easier just to get one in the draft and save that money to pay offensive linemen, defensive linemen, wide receivers. Because look at the wide receiver market. The wide receiver market exploded. And so Vaccaro,
Antonio Brown.
Yeah, Antonio Brown, the Seattle receiver who went on to, I think, where did he go? I don't even have my list in front of me anymore. But
Philadelphia.
Washington. Yeah, $40 million. So you see a lot more movement out of the receiver market than you see out of the safety market. I think Vaccaro is probably someone who's going to get more attention after the draft. When teams see what they missed on in the draft, then you'll start seeing guys like Kenny Vaccaro, Eric Reed, some of these other safeties who are not seeing much action at all get attention because the market's going to be set a lot lower for them, and teams will have a pretty good idea of what they need to fill with what's left out there. So,
to me, strictly my thing on Suh. To put it mildly, I never wanted Ndamukong Suh. I think he's the dirtiest player in the league. Now, that's not to say that if he decides to play for the New Orleans Saints that I won't support it. The bottom line for me is this team a better, more functional, in a better opportunity to win team with him than without him? Sure. You're not going to have an impact player like Ndamukong Suh on your team and it not improve the defense immediately. It's an immediate impact player. But to be the most dominant player in college football and come out and play in Detroit, play in Miami, sign a $114 million deal with Miami, and you got to take a free agent tour of all these prospective teams to somehow be relevant in the headlines. You know, if we get him, fine. If we don't, bottom line, the New Orleans Saints defense is not going to rise or fall with or without Ndamukong Suh.
No.
Everybody's making such a big deal out of him being paired with Aaron Donald in Los Angeles for the Rams. Guys, Aaron Donald isn't the player that Cam Jordan is. We don't have the LA media market feeding the frenzy in New Orleans, so you don't hear about that.
You know, I'm really surprised at some of the moves that the Rams are making because I don't think they are making their team better. I think they're bringing in guys with reputations, with names, thinking they're going to be better players, but they're really mercenaries, like you just described with Sue. This is a guy who's just looking for a paycheck, and he'll turn it on and turn it off depending on the game, who they're playing, and what are the odds he gets recognition for it. Okay. I don't see this team. I think the Rams are going to take a step backwards because of these kind of moves. I've seen teams make these kind of moves before, and it never works out the way they want it to.
The most recent example we saw. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No. Go ahead. What's
the most recent example we saw? This was the so-called Dream Team.
That's exactly what I was thinking of.
Yeah. I mean, Andy Reid's last team in Philly. They brought all these big name guys in on 1 and 2 year, big money deals. And I think it was Vince Young, that, of all people, that spouted off in the media and called them the Dream Team. And they didn't even sniff a winning record that year. The Rams still have a lot of good young pieces, and I love Sean McVay as a head coach. So I'd still go into the season considering them a contender. But I'm with you, Alan. And I think we had a private conversation on one of the sites about this kind of thing. That I'm just going to sit back with my bowl of popcorn, and I'm predicting a locker room implosion at this with them.
Yeah, because
you got Ndamukong Suh, you've got Marcus Peters.
Well, you don't know if you're going to get Sue or not, but the point I have is one of the reasons why the 2017 Saints were as good as they were is because these players fundamentally like each other, and you play a bit with a chip on your shoulder because you felt disrespected and so forth, but they mesh together as a unit. And if anything, if the movie Miracle about the 1980 U.S. hockey team teaches you anything, it's about how well you play together as a team. It's not about individual talent. And you go back to what was it, 2008 U.S. Olympic basketball team, the dream team that wasn't, the nightmare team. You know, the team is so talented, yet they all played as individuals, not as a team, and they lost as individuals. I see that kind of thing happen every time that somebody just decides to start trying to rebuild the Pro Bowl roster from previous years past. And I think that's what you're seeing with the Rams, is you're trying to build that Pro Bowl roster of guys who are just, lights out kind of players as individuals. But when they get put on a team where you have other players who think as individuals, who don't think of themselves as part of a unit, then you start to have problems because now you get the finger pointing. Well, I know I'm great. How come you're not great? How come you didn't make that play? It's not my job. It's your job. Whereas with the Saints, they knew they were stronger together as a unit than they were as individuals. So that's really the secret to building a great team, is you have them believe that we can accomplish more as a unit than we can as individuals. It's not about individual glory. It's about the team's goals and the team's glory. So that's why I see a team like the Rams having a lot of problems. And this is about the time Wade Phillips is in his second year. Wade Phillips' third and fourth years with the team is about the time his defense starts getting predictable. Teams kind of figure out what he likes to do based on certain situations, and that's when you see him generally move on to another team. Yep. So, they got a lot of factors working against the Rams right now. So we'll see how this goes.
Not to mention, not the least of which is going to be, you're going to have a lot of turnover of people from that offense that was so dynamic, or offensive and defense, that was so dynamic and was so effective this year. Anytime you change out a part, that's going to affect the final result.
And, in so much of the league, so much of seasons, and you look at the Atlanta Falcons last year compared to the Atlanta Falcons of 2016, so much of a season depends on how the ball bounces. Plays that happened for you the previous years, for some reason doesn't happen the next year. You're not getting that unbelievable reception out of a no-name receiver. You're not breaking that big run because the guy's not blocking as perfectly as he blocked last time. You're not getting the turnovers. You're not getting the sacks. Those things happen. And I think, you could see that happening to a team like the Rams where they take kind of that step back because suddenly now, those little gimme plays they were giving Goff earlier, the teams are going to be sitting on those check down routes now. So when he tries to do that check down, the receiver's not going to be open. He's going to have to push the ball more. How he responds to that will determine how successful the offense is. If you can come back and be much more successful moving the football, then suddenly now you make your own success the following year. So that's how I see the Rams playing out, which kind of took us a long way away from Sue. But, that's the fear that Sue's going to sign with somebody like that. I could see Sue at the end of the day signing with the Cowboys, honestly. I really can. I can see him going to Dallas.
I think the whole conversation is kind of a microcosm of the point we're trying to make. If he's in the conversation, fine. If he's not, that's fine too. We're not going to win or lose as per him being on this team or not.
Yeah. There's plenty.
Bob, since I never introduced you, you want to tell everyone where to find you and how to follow your work?
Me and my work. Well, thank you guys as always for having me on the show. It's it's a privilege and an honor, and I consider you guys family. I feel part of your part of your family. So you all are stuck with me, and thank you to all the listeners and the viewers as well. But my work can be followed. I work for the Canal Street Chronicles, and we have a number of terrific writers. We try to cover the Saints as in depth as we can. My work can be followed on Canal Street Chronicles or at Saints CSC on Twitter, or my own personal Twitter handle is at BobbyR2613. Can also be followed on Facebook under Bob Rose, and I'm in. I think I've got all the Saints groups, Facebook's groups nailed down. And I feel honored too if you ever private message me and want to talk about the Saints or comment on our articles or anything like that. But looking forward to a great off season. We're wrapping up free agency and going to start on our 1,500 mock drafts as we get ready for the draft in April.
Yeah, I'm looking at the draft stuff too as we even talk about this, because I agree with y'all. With Sean, I think the Saints might make a few more moves, but they're pretty much done now in free agency. I think it's really on to the draft and focused on the draft. Unfortunately, they missed on Jimmy Graham. Unfortunately, they probably going to miss on Sue. So it doesn't. This time last week, I was talking about scenarios that the Saints could take the best available player, or if they want to get aggressive, trade up for a quarterback or something like that. I think the trade up for a quarterback is less likely now because they need that first and third round pick to kind of address defensive line, tight end, kind of positions. So, yeah, I think that's where you're going to find that the third defensive tackle will probably come out of the draft. That defensive end who probably is going to be the insurance in case Okafor cannot come back well from that Achilles injury is there. And I think, obviously the future for Fleener is in doubt if the Saints can get one of those top tight ends. So, there's several options they can go with. In the first and the third round. After that, I think that's where the depth comes in. They're going to start bringing in backup linebackers, backup offensive linemen. We talked about Jerome Bushrod earlier, and this is the last point I'll make about this. Jerome Bushrod is the Bryce Harris insurance policy, that we won't have to see Bryce Harris ever to take the field because you've got Bushrod now to back up Armstead, kind of replacing the Zach Strief when he retired, the Zach Strief role in this team.
We want to invite everyone once again to. Did I interrupt you again?
No, you just kind of like, all right, whatever he's got to say about Bryce Harris. We know how he feels. Go ahead.
Well, Bryce Harris is like a yo-yo, man.
Yes, he is.
Two things you can count on every week from the New Orleans Saints. There's going to be a game, and Bryce Harris is going to be re-signed on Monday.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, Bushrod is the Bryce Harris. We'll never see the field insurance policy. So that's all we need.
And who was it the year before that? The guy that came over from the Raiders.
I
forget his name.
Khalif
Barnes.
Yeah,
yes.
Khalif Barnes.
Yes.
You think as many updates as I got is Khalif Barnes has been re-signed by the Saints. Oh my God! Get him a group discount. Stop it.
He's got an Airbnb. That's where he's staying at right now.
But we want to invite everyone to subscribe to us on iTunes and on YouTube, and join us right here. Same
bat time.
Saints. I'm not going to use Batman, even though our colors are black. Same Saints time, same Saints channel. Every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. Central Standard Time, and we also want to invite everyone to join us on our special Donnie Lambert second annual pre-draft extravaganza palooza. We really have to do some marketing work on the name. But it will be April 24th, and with a special expanded 2-hour edition beginning at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time on that night. Oh, Alan is getting all deep in it now. Hey,
and I'm waiting for my Mike Detillier draft report that comes out next month. So, yeah, Bob and I were talking about that off the air. We both have our draft guides, and I've been getting. I just realized, look at this Lindy's. It's the 12th one. I've got all 12. I've been getting them that long. That's pathetic, but I've been getting them that long. I've got my Ricky Williams one. I think I actually had Ricky Williams sign that one, but yeah, got my Ricky Williams draft guide.
I was in a a Facebook chat group, and somebody said, "Hey, does anybody want to go to the draft in Dallas?" I said, "Hey, yeah, man, I would love to be there when the Saints draft Baker Mayfield." They kicked me out of the group.
Oh,
I got removed for that.
that's nice. That's nice.
Yeah,
but,
well,
we in fact, if we'll see what happens with Sue, but I think we're going to start next week. We should start profiling some of the draft positions because guess what? It's already the last week of March next week.
37 days till the draft.
Yeah. So, we need to start talking about the Saints' interest, defensive line, offensive line, tight end, wide receiver, quarterback. We'll go through all that because, I see lots of names going around. We need to bring Bob back, of course, for those discussions. But start talking about some of, where you see some of these guys going and what players you see the Saints targeting in the draft. And probably we'll start with defensive line next week. Probably defensive tackle and edge player. So, in the meantime, that's something to look forward to for next week. Want to thank Bob, our unofficial third member of the booth. As always, glad to have you, Bob. Sean, who was a little under the weather tonight. Glad you were able to stick through the whole episode, Sean. I thought you weren't going to make it for a while. And,
yeah, well, I turned green and then I just turned away. So
there you go.
Hey, sometimes you got to bite the bullet and just power through.
There we go. All right.
Soldiers on.
As always, thank you guys for joining us. We'll see you next time on Under the Dome. Good night, everybody.